The walls of the world's great palaces are not merely silent witnesses to history, they are active participants, screaming messages that most modern visitors simply walk past without noticing. When you step into a grand estate like Versailles, Hampton Court, or the Winter Palace, you are entering a meticulously constructed text, a book written in stone, plaster, and gold leaf. For centuries, monarchs did not just decorate their homes to look beautiful, they decorated them to communicate power, lineage, and divine right. Every carved flower, every mythical beast, and every geometric arrangement was a deliberate code, understood implicitly by the courtiers of the time, but largely lost to us today. This visual language was necessary because, for much of history, literacy was a luxury, but symbols were universal. A king could not explain his foreign policy to every visitor, but he could carve it into the ceiling of his audience chamber. These decorations served as propaganda, warnings, and sometimes desperate pleas for legitimacy. They told guests who was in charge, who was an enemy, and whose bloodline was protected by God himself. To the untrained eye, a ceiling is just a painting of clouds and cherubs. To the initiated, it is a political map of Europe and a threat of war. Consider the immense psychological weight of walking down a corridor where the very moulding on the walls tells you that the owner holds the power of life and death. This was the original intent of palace decor. It was designed to overwhelm the senses while subtly programming the mind. The architects and artists were the spin doctors of their era, embedding narratives of absolute control into the architecture itself. We see pretty patterns. They saw assertions of dominance. Today, we are going to peel back the layers of paint and gilt to read these buildings as they were meant to be read. We are stepping into a world where a fruit carved into a gatepost could signal vast wealth, where a specific type of leaf meant immortality, and where a simple knot in a rope could signify a bond that no army could break. These are the secret languages of the aristocracy, hidden in plain sight. Number 10. The pomegranate of Aragon. If you walk through the older sections of Hampton Court Palace in London, look closely at the wooden panels and stone friezes. You will repeatedly find a curious symbol, a pomegranate, often bursting open to reveal its seeds. This was not a dietary preference. It was the personal badge of Catherine of Aragon, the first wife of Henry VIII. In the language of heraldry, the pomegranate represented fertility and abundance, a hopeful prayer for a male heir that would secure the Tudor dynasty. It was also a symbol of her Spanish heritage, referencing the city of Granada, which means pomegranate. However, the persistence of this symbol tells a darker story. When Henry VIII sought to annul his marriage to Catherine to marry Anne Boleyn, he embarked on a campaign to erase Catherine from history. He ordered her badges removed and replaced with Anne's falcon. Yet at Hampton Court, many pomegranates survived. Some historians suggest the workmen, loyal to the popular Queen Catherine, deliberately left them in high, hard-to-reach places or obscure corners where the king's eye might not wander. Others argue it was simply too expensive and time-consuming to chip away every single instance of her memory. Today, these surviving pomegranates are not just decorations, they are scars of a political upheaval that changed the religious landscape of England forever. They stand as a testament to a queen who was cast aside but refused to be forgotten. The symbol that was meant to promise life and heirs ultimately became a marker of endurance and the stubborn persistence of the past in the face of a tyrant's erasure. Number 9. The pineapple of privilege. In the architectural language of the 17th and 18th centuries, the pineapple was the ultimate status symbol, far surpassing gold or jewels in its immediate communicative power. You will often see stone pineapples adorning the tops of gate piers at the entrances of grand country estates or carved into the lintels of dining hall doors. To the modern observer, this looks like a quirky reverence for tropical fruit, But in the Georgian era, a single real pineapple could cost the equivalent of thousands of dollars today. Because they were so difficult to grow in the cold climates of Europe, requiring specialized hothouses and immense labor, presenting a pineapple at a banquet was a declaration of extreme wealth. It told your guests that you had the resources to conquer nature itself. Consequently, the stone pineapple became a permanent code for hospitality, but a very specific kind of hospitality. One that said, "I can afford to give you the best, because I have more resources than God." It was an aggressive flex of financial muscle disguised as a welcoming gesture. The most famous example is the Dunmore pineapple in Scotland, a folly where the entire building is shaped like the fruit. It was built by the Earl of Dunmore to announce his return from the American colonies. It wasn't just a fun design choice. It was a billboard screaming his success and sophistication to the surrounding countryside. When you see a stone pineapple today, you are looking at the 18th century equivalent of parking a supercar in the driveway. Number 8. The Napoleonic bee. When Napoleon Bonaparte seized power in France, he faced a branding crisis. He needed to legitimize his rule as an emperor, but he could not use the fleur-de-lis, which was the symbol of the Bourbon monarchy he had helped displace. He needed a symbol that was royal, but distinct from the kings who had been guillotined. He found his answer in the tomb of Childeric I, a Merovingian king from the 5th century. Inside the tomb, archaeologists had found hundreds of golden ornaments that looked like bees. Napoleon adopted the bee as his personal emblem. It was a brilliant stroke of propaganda. By choosing a symbol older than the fleur-de-lis, he was bypassing the Bourbon dynasty entirely and connecting his new empire to the very roots of French history. The bee also symbolized industry, hard work, and the hive mind, a disciplined society working for the good of the leader. It was the perfect metaphor for the military state he was building. You can still see these bees swarming the fabrics, walls, and carpets of Malmaison and Fontainebleau. They look like decorative patterns, but they are actually a political argument woven into silk. They assert that Napoleon was not a usurper, but a restorer of true ancient French glory. Every tiny golden insect was a soldier in his war for legitimacy. Number 7. The Tudor rose. Perhaps no floral decoration carries more political baggage than the Tudor rose. It is a composite flower, half red and half white, created to symbolize the end of the Wars of the Roses, a bloody civil war that tore England apart. The red rose represented the House of Lancaster, and the white rose represented the House of York. When Henry VII defeated Richard III and married Elizabeth of York, he merged the two flowers into one to visualize the peace he had brought to the realm. This symbol was plastered everywhere, on ceilings, gates, stained glass, and even the hulls of ships. It was not merely a celebration of a wedding, it was a warning against sedition. The message was clear. The two houses are now one flesh. To fight against the king is to tear apart this unity and invite chaos back into the land. It was a visual peace treaty that the public was forced to look at every single day. At King's College Chapel in Cambridge, the Tudor rose and the portcullis, another Tudor badge, are carved with such heaviness and repetition that they dominate the sacred space. It suggests that the authority of the king is equal to, or perhaps intertwined with, the authority of God. The rose is a beautiful flower, but in this context, it is a heavy stamp of ownership stamped onto the nation's architecture. Number 6. The acanthus leaf. If you look at the top of a Corinthian column on any neoclassical palace, government building, or museum, you will see the jagged, leafy forms of the acanthus plant. This is one of the oldest and most enduring codes in Western architecture, dating back to ancient Greece. But why this specific weed? The legend goes that the sculptor Callimachus saw an acanthus plant growing through a woven basket on a grave, surviving despite the heavy stone tile placed on top of it. Because of this, the acanthus became the symbol of immortality and resurrection, life that persists despite the weight of death or stone. For monarchs and emperors, wrapping their palaces in acanthus leaves was a way of projecting the eternal nature of their reign. It was a subtle assertion that their dynasty would grow through obstacles and survive the passage of time, just like the stubborn plant on the grave. In the context of funerary art and royal mausoleums, the code shifts slightly to promise a life after death. But on the facade of a palace, it is about endurance. It says, "We have always been here, and we will always be here." It is a botanical metaphor for political stability, carved into the very pillars that hold the roof up. Number 5. The royal oak. In British royal residences, you will often find oak leaves and acorns carved into wood panelling and plasterwork, particularly in buildings restored or constructed after 1660. This is a direct reference to the future King Charles II, who famously hid in an oak tree at Boscobel House to escape the Roundhead soldiers after the Battle of Worcester. That single tree saved the life of the monarch and, by extension, the monarchy itself. After the restoration of the crown, the oak became a sacred symbol of royalist loyalty. To decorate one's home with oak leaves was a code of allegiance. It signaled to visitors that you supported the king and the legitimate succession. It was a way for the aristocracy to signal their political stance without saying a word, differentiating themselves from the parliamentarians who had supported Cromwell. The oak also carries ancient connotations of strength, endurance, and British stoicism. By co-opting this tree, the monarchy aligned itself with the land itself. The king was not just a ruler, he was as natural and rooted in the soil as the ancient forests. It turned a moment of desperate hiding into a myth of resilience. Number 4. The ermine spots. In many throne rooms and royal portraits, you will see a pattern of black shapes on a white background. This represents the fur of the ermine, a stoat whose coat turns pure white in winter. In medieval bestiaries, the ermine was described as an animal that would rather die than soil its pure white fur. Hunters were said to be able to catch it by surrounding its burrow with mud. The ermine would surrender to the hunters rather than dirty its coat. This legend made the ermine the perfect symbol for royalty, representing moral purity and incorruptibility. The ermine spots, the black tips of the tails, became a shorthand for high nobility and the judiciary. When a king or queen is depicted wearing ermine, or when the pattern adorns the canopy of a throne, it is a statement of ethical superiority. It claims that the monarch's justice is untainted and their character is spotless. Queen Elizabeth I used this imagery extensively to reinforce her image as the Virgin Queen. The ermine portrait depicts her with the animal, reinforcing that her power came from her purity. The decoration serves as a constant reminder to the court that the sovereign exists on a higher moral plane than the common man, justifying their absolute power. Number 3. The all-seeing eye. Often associated with conspiracy theories today, the Eye of Providence, a realistic eye often surrounded by rays of light or enclosed in a triangle, was a staple of royal and religious decoration long before it ended up on the dollar bill. In the context of palace architecture, particularly in the 17th and 18th centuries, it represented the divine watchfulness of God over the monarch, but it also doubled as a reminder of the monarch's surveillance over the court. At the Palace of Versailles and other absolute monarchies, the king was God's lieutenant on earth. The eye symbolized that nothing happened in the kingdom without the knowledge of the crown. It was a metaphysical security camera. In the theatre of the court, where whispers and plots were common, the decorative eye staring down from a cupola or a pediment created a sense of unease. It enforced behavior through the feeling of being watched. This symbol blurs the line between divine protection and authoritarian control. It comforted the loyal by suggesting God was on their side, but it terrified the traitor by suggesting there were no secrets. It encapsulates the dual nature of kingship, a benevolent father figure who is also an all-knowing judge. Number 2. The grotesque and the gargoyle. While we often think of palaces as places of beauty, they are frequently covered in monsters. Grotesques and gargoyles, hideous, distorted faces, peer down from the eaves and cornices of the most holy and royal buildings. This seems like a contradiction, but in the medieval and Renaissance mind, these ugly carvings served a vital function, apotropaic magic. They were designed to scare away evil spirits. The logic was that demons would be frightened off by their own likenesses, or that the grotesques would spiritually vomit the evil out of the building. However, there is a second, more subversive code hidden here. The stone carvers who built these palaces were often commoners, and they sometimes used these figures to mock their masters. There are instances of gargoyles carved with the specific facial features of unpopular bishops, abbots, or local lords. It was a permanent satire carved in stone, high enough that the subject might not notice, but visible enough to be a private joke for the workers. These decorations represent the tension between the elite and the working class. The king gets the gold leaf inside, but the stonemason gets the last laugh on the rain gutter. It is a rare instance of the voice of the common people surviving on the walls of the ultimate symbols of oppression. Number 1. The solar geometry of Versailles. The ultimate royal code is not a single symbol, but an entire landscape. The Palace of Versailles is oriented on an east-west axis that is deliberately aligned with the path of the sun. Louis XIV, the Sun King, designed the palace so that the sun would rise directly over the Cour d'Honneur and set along the line of the Grand Canal. This was not just for lighting, it was a cosmological argument. By aligning his home with the solar system, Louis was coding his daily routine into the fabric of the universe. When the king rose from bed, the sun rose with him. When he went to sleep, the sun set. It positioned the king not merely as a ruler of France, but as the centre of the gravitational pull of the state. The layout of the gardens, with their radiating paths, mimicked the rays of the sun, with the king's bedroom at the centre. This is the most ambitious decorative code ever attempted. It asserts that the monarchy is a natural phenomenon, as inevitable and necessary as the sunrise. It was designed to make any opposition to the king seem not just illegal, but unnatural, like trying to stop the rotation of the earth. It is the architecture of total, absolute submission to one man's ego. These palaces stand today as empty shells, their occupants long gone, and their political power dissolved into democracy. Yet, the codes remain. They are fossilized ambitions, trapped in the limestone and marble. When we trace the line of a sunray at Versailles, or spot a pomegranate at Hampton Court, we are connecting directly with the anxieties and egos of the people who shaped our world. We see that they were obsessed with legacy, terrified of being forgotten, and desperate to justify their place in the hierarchy. Is it possible that we are doing the same thing today, just with different symbols? We no longer carve lions on our gateposts, but we curate our digital lives and design our spaces to signal our own tribes and values. The medium has changed, but the human need to project identity onto our environment remains exactly the same. We are still writing our stories on the walls, hoping someone in the future will stop to read them. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the hidden languages of royal architecture, hitting the like button helps us uncover more stories like this. And for more investigations into the secret history of the aristocracy, make sure you're subscribed. We have a video coming up on the dark history of royal jewellery that you won't want to miss. I'll see you in the next one.